And we continue at 106 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang has the day off. He'll be back with us on Monday. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a former member of the Los Angeles City Council, an LAPD sergeant, Councilman Dennis Zine. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you, John, and your great KABC listeners. Great afternoon.
Thank you so much for stopping by. Let's start out with this totally ridiculous proposed legislation that generated a lot of attention this week. It's authored by Rick Chavez Burr, who is a Democrat out of West Hollywood, and he has written legislation that would essentially criminalize self-defense. If someone has broken into your house, you wake up in the middle of the night, you discover they're in your house. According to this new legislation, you don't have the right to assume that they're there to kill you, and you should retreat. You should not try to defend yourself in that scenario. The public outcry has been dramatic, as you can imagine, and Rick Chavez Burr saying, well, many people are misrepresenting what was actually in the bill. No. That was in the bill. That's what he's trying to do. As a man who's both been a policymaker and a beat cop, a cop who's had to deal with situations exactly like that before, what do you make of this idiocy?
I think Gascon has assumed a new name and taken a position in the state legislature. This is reflective of Gascon. This is exactly what Gascon wanted to do. This is part of the Gascon agenda. True, the Assembly Bill 1333, by this, what I call as a whack job assembly member, comes up with this absurdity. Someone's breaking into your house. You cannot resist. You cannot do anything. You need to surrender. This is a convicted felon that breaks into your house that wants to steal and maybe kill you and your family. You can't do anything. Call 911. You'll wait till someone answers. Hopefully someone will answer eventually, and then a unit will arrive when they have one available. I mean, what are you supposed to do? This is absurdity beyond my ability to comprehend how ridiculous the state of California is in the leadership. This is absolutely ridiculous. You can't protect your privacy, your home, your belongings. I mean, we have number of people getting CCWs because now you can get them in the state of California. This basically throws that out. But to think of a state assembly member would come up with this ridiculous measure, and believe it or not, there are people who are supporting this. There are people who think this is a wonderful, wonderful solution to crime. I believe that since we have a new district attorney in Los Angeles County, crime has gone down because there are now consequences. Officers have been motivated because they know there'll be consequences. Criminals are aware. We don't hear the same stories that we've heard in the past about the shoplifting activities that were taking place at an incredible rate. It looks that things are improving. And what we have is this absurdity from the state legislature, from this assembly member that comes up with this ridiculous, most ridiculous, obscene and absurd measure to protect criminals, and you in your own home or business can't protect yourself. You've got to retreat. Now they're advocating, don't call the police, retreat. Run away from your own home so someone can go in and do what they wish. This is absolutely outrageous, but this is reflective of the George Gascon mentality and ridiculous. And hopefully this will get flushed away by someone in the state legislature. It won't proceed through to go to the Senate, but AB 1333, this is fundamentally against common sense and logic and utmost stupidity. And I use that term very loosely, stupidity, when you can't protect property and your homes, and felons now can go out and do what they wish to do with no consequences. AB 1333 by Assemblymember Rick Burr is really off his rocker with this assembly bill.
You know, it's funny. Whenever we take calls from people who've been the victim of a crime before, and the cops show up and the cops take the report and the cops have a conversation with the victim, they always say the cops tell them the same thing to almost a person. The cops say, go out and get a gun and train yourself on how to use it. They say get a dog. They say take a self-defense class, whatever the case may be. But if you look at the advice that they give in totality, what they're essentially saying is be prepared. Be prepared to defend yourself. Don't rely on us because you may need to provide a response in seconds when we're minutes away. So take care of yourself. Do what you need to do. Now, what this assemblyman is saying is essentially disregard all of this advice from the cops, the people who deal with this on a daily basis, and just let them come and take a report after you get robbed or raped or stabbed or whatever.
Exactly. The legislation could increase legal risks for bystanders intervening when crime is there and they try to help. They could even go for the bystanders that try to intervene. And then this is ridiculous. This ridiculous legislation is supported by some wacko groups. Every Town for Gun Safety, they think that's good. They think self-defense death is homicide if retreat was possible. So they want to say, if retreat is possible, if you could have run out the back door and you didn't do that, now you're in violation. Now we'll prosecute you for not taking evasive action. I don't know how people come up with this legislation. I don't know how these people get elected in public office when they have this philosophy that says, let the criminals do what they wish, and you, the victim, potential victim, has to run away, has to hide, do whatever you can, but don't protect yourself, don't protect your family when these vicious criminals come in and prey upon you in your home, the sanctuary of your home. You're not even safe there anymore because of this type of legislation. AB 1333. People need to remember that number, 1333. Absurdity. And if anyone supports that, they're crazy. Simply put, they're crazy because you're giving no rights to the victims. You're giving all the rights, benefits, and privileges to those hardened criminals that want to go and abuse you and your family. I just can't believe at this late stage in our society, people are actually advocating this kind of legislation.
Well, and one of the problems that we have in California is that police departments can't keep cops staying on the force. These cops are retiring early. They're moving out of state. They're finding departments in suburban cities to work for that are more sane than the big cities. I don't know if you're then going to turn around and ask police officers, okay, we know that crime is out of control in California, but we want you to spend your time going after people who are the victims of crime, who defended themselves when they were the victim of a crime. Go arrest those people. I don't see how you keep anyone on the force.
Well, we have a very difficult time. I've got the latest statistics. LAPD, from the rank of chief of police to the recruit in the academy, detectives, air support, SWAT, everybody, 8,778. That's what you have protecting all the people in the city of Los Angeles, 8,778. So when you take the detectives and you take the people out of uniform and you take the people working other assignments, you don't have very many people in uniform and in black and white traveling down the street. You don't have many people working traffic. You've got a shrinking police department. And I know there's a big controversy in the fire department, not one in the police department yet, but I'm sure down the road someone's going to say, why does it take so long for a 911 call to be answered? Because we're short of those dispatchers. Why does it take so long for a unit to arrive? Because we don't have them out there. Now they're talking about launching drones. Have the drones response to the call instead of a police unit. I mean, John, we're in a terrible situation, and it's just getting worse. And it just continues with legislation like this that comes about to say, let's make it easier for the criminal, and let's make the victim the person who's going to have to face criminal charges, the one who's going to lose their home civilly and then go to jail because they did something to protect themselves and their family. This absolutely blows my mind that people would actually advocate this type of legislation. And there are wackos out there who support this type of legislation. So this assembly member, Rick Chavez Burr, has his head where the sun don't shine.
We're speaking with former L.A. City Councilman Dennis Zine. Councilman, the chief of the L.A. Fire Department is asking the Los Angeles City Council to take a vote to reinstate her as fire chief. She, of course, was fired from that position by the mayor, Karen Bass. The mayor says that the fire department didn't tell anyone about the wind before the fires started, and certainly didn't make the connection that the wind could lead to fire risk in Los Angeles. And because of that, she went on a trip to Africa to go to the inauguration of the president of Ghana instead of sticking around in Los Angeles and leading the city through the fires. She also said that the chief did not do an adequate job in preparation for the fires. The chief says, "You cut my budget by $17 million. I didn't have mechanics to fix the trucks to put in the Pacific Palisades to fight those fires due to the budget cuts." What do you make of what the fire chief is now saying to the city council?
I've done some research on this. Clearly, the fire department budget was cut. It was cut with mechanics. It was cut with overtime. While the firefighters did receive a contract, it was a delayed contract. They did receive that, and that means additional funds for them, compensation. But clearly, there are problems within the fire department, and it's a lack of funding, lack of personnel. And there's been visual shots of the garage where these fire apparatus, hook and ladders, et cetera, are waiting to be fixed. They either don't have the mechanics or they don't have the parts. So now we see this showdown between the mayor and the fire chief, who's decided not to take that demotion. Now, she's not fired. She's simply demoted to a different rank. So it's not like she loses her job and she's unemployed. She will have a position in the fire department, whatever it be, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, this brings about whose responsibility is it? Is that fire chief responsible to say, Mayor, we're going to have some bad weather, we need to prepare? Or should someone in the mayor's office be watching the weather reports and decide, and maybe call the fire chief, are we adequately prepared? And I will tell you, if they had held over those 1,000 firefighters without apparatus to put them on, someone would be complaining, look at how much we spent on overtime, leaving these people to work and nothing for them to do. Oh my God, how much did we spend in overtime for these 1,000 firefighters? So it's kind of like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. The problem is, we need to have the fire chief the adequate budget to do the job. She's got a lot of experience. I understand the union supports her. So now you're going to see the showdown. And I can remember as a city council member when Jimmy Hahn, the former mayor, decided Bernard Parks would not get a second term. That came before the council, similar to this situation where the council could overturn the mayor. The council went with the mayor. Bernard Parks did not get a second term. And lo and behold, he became a council member following that. Jimmy Hahn wanted to be the judge. So what we find happening is the drama of Los Angeles. Los Angeles has a lot of drama. This is just another episode in the drama of Los Angeles where we'll see the showdown. Who's with the mayor? Who's not? The mayor next year is going to come up for re-election. Is she going to have support, unanimous support with the council? We know that the fire chief has some support. We know the mayor has support. So we'll see what happens in this public showdown.
Well, what the mayor is claiming, and I'm not saying that the fire chief is perfect. I know there's a lot of criticism of her, and there was criticism of her even before the fire started. But the two claims that the mayor has made are provably false. She claims that the fire department never said anything about the winds. We know from their social media platforms. We know from public statements that they've put out. We know from media reports that were on every single television station, radio station, social media in town. Word was out that the wind was coming. Even the mayor herself, Karen Bass, put out a tweet saying that the wind was coming. Whether or not she wrote it or a staffer wrote it, who knows? But that tweet did go out under her name. We know that there were meetings that took place between the mayor's staff and the fire department before the fires in regard to the wind. What the mayor, I guess, is alleging is that the fire chief should have showed up to City Hall and said, you have to cancel your trip. You cannot go. Or put it in lights or put it on a billboard or a marquee somewhere that just simply telling her that the wind was coming and the wind was a threat in terms of fire risk, that wasn't good enough, that they needed to do something more dramatic than that. The other claim, as you mentioned, the cuts in the budget, the $17 million cuts, made it so that the fire department didn't have the resources to put additional trucks in the Palisades when the fires broke out. That's the mayor's responsibility to make sure that that department is adequately funded so they have the resources to respond to a fire like this. In fact, the chief went before the fire commission along with Councilwoman Tracy Park and others saying that due to the budget cuts, they didn't have the ability to respond in the way that they would like to if there were massive fires in the city of Los Angeles. I don't see how you look at the mayor's reasons for firing the chief or demoting the chief, whatever you want to call it, how those are valid in any sort of provable way when, in fact, we know the opposite's true.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. But what we find is the drama of politics, and that's what we see is how the council is going to separate on this. You're going to see those supporting the chief, supporting the mayor. We'll see how this drama draws out Tuesday when it comes to a meeting, a public meeting. But what's going to happen is either going to strengthen the mayor or weaken the mayor. The bottom line is now what's going to happen for the taxpayers of Los Angeles, what they're going to see happening is a ballot measure to say we need to raise billions of dollars so we can build fire stations and equip them with apparatus and personnel. So what you see is a property tax measure that's going to come about in the next few months saying, oh, we need to vote for this so we can build new fire stations and we can have additional apparatus for the next 100 years so we'll have a fire apparatus to take care of that situation. So the result is it's going to hit the taxpayers one way or another. But who's responsible? They're all responsible. The mayor's responsible. The council's responsible. I know Tracy Park from that area was extremely involved in this. And the fire department has notices. The media is very cooperative in making notice. And I think the mayor made a commitment when she became mayor, she wouldn't be traveling outside the United States. So there's a lot of controversy here, a lot of finger pointing. The bottom line is, at the end, who's going to hit the ball? The taxpayers are going to hit the ball when they vote either yes or no for a ballot measure to increase their property taxes. That's going to be the ultimate on this situation.
What do you see happening in the future, politically speaking, between the council and the mayor? Because you're now starting to see criticism come from members of the council directed at the mayor, including from Monica Rodriguez, who represents a district in the San Fernando Valley, Tracy Park, who represents the impacted district in the Pacific Palisades, coastal Los Angeles. I'm sure there are others who are taking the wait-and-see approach to see what kind of response these council members get for being publicly critical of the mayor. Do you think the mayor's on thin ice?
I think the mayor has some concerns, and she should have concerns, because if you start having controversy like this of a citywide and it goes to the national level, it does not strengthen her position as the mayor. And then people see that vulnerability, and then they start taking advantage of that. And we know there's names that have been batted around that say, they want to be the next mayor for this or that. They'll take advantage of that. And I know that the council, as we've seen in the media lately, it's split. And the mayor doesn't have unanimous support. Does she have the 10 votes? Time will tell. But clearly there are council members that say we weren't informed, the mayor did not keep us informed, et cetera, et cetera. So with the 15 people, and I know some of them on that council who do not support the police at all, they will not support any measure for the police. I don't see that so much for the fire department as far as funding, but I know there's council members who adamantly oppose to anything that the police need, and that's been clearly reflective in their votes. So we'll see how it pans out. Tuesday is going to be the time when we find out how many votes are with the mayor. And if she can't muster up support for this, it really is a show weakness on her part for her reelection, which comes up in a very short period of time.
Rick Caruso, who ran for mayor against Karen Bass last time around, has been very critical of her performance all through the fires. Do you think he's going to run again next time?
I've heard rumors about him looking at governor, looking at mayor. I know Rick Caruso from the time he was a police commissioner, obviously a very active businessman in Los Angeles. I know he was personally impacted by the fire. I wouldn't be surprised if he attempts to run again for a political office. I mean, he spent millions of dollars in his last attempt. We'll see what happens this time around. But I think he loves Los Angeles. I know he's made major investments in Los Angeles, commercial, et cetera. I think his heart's in the right place. It just matters. He went from a Republican to a Democrat. Will people buy that? Will they go with that situation and say, okay, we need a fresh change? Or will the mayor be able to prevail? Look, she does have time in the assembly. She does have time in Congress. She has a lot of experience. I think that she needs to surround herself with people. Her public safety director, we know what happened with some legal issues where he's no longer representing her with public safety. There's been some issues that have come about that really show some weakness. I personally think that she's got some challenges before her, some very serious challenges when it comes up. Because anytime they find some kind of issue, political officials jump on it and they make that wedge wider and wider. And I think that's what you're going to see happening. And I think it's going to start Tuesday, and that'll be a showing what kind of strength she has. If she can't get that 10 votes, that's going to be a serious, serious shot against her.
Last question before you go. The LA Times historically has defended the behavior of essentially the Democratic machine politicians at LA City Hall and all through the state of California. Karen Bass was elected mayor in part due to her support from the Democratic Party of Los Angeles and National Democratic Party figures like Presidents Biden, Vice President Harris, former President Obama, and others. Do you think now that the owner of the LA Times, now that he's been red-pilled, Patrick Soon-Shiong, and he says that he's going to take that newspaper in a different direction, and they're going to have to start looking at these public officials with a far more critical eye than they have in the past. Do you think that changes the calculus at all here in Los Angeles, where instead of having the newspaper running cover for them, the newspaper could be aggressively reporting on their failures?
Well, I think as far as Los Angeles Times, they've lost so many readers and so many online readers. That paper has really shrunk, and I think him putting a daughter in charge of some of the sections of the Times has really crippled that paper. I know many people I speak to say they have nothing to do with the Times. It's really shrunk as far as a popular newspaper with some impact and some significance. I think their significance has been dwindled to bare existence. So I don't think it's going to matter either way. I don't think a lot of people have respect for the Times. I don't think they believe what the Times says, and a lot of people have dropped their subscriptions with the Times just because they seem to be off. And I think he's trying to bring it back to some balance. I think it may be a little too late. Like you're on life support. Finally, they take you off of life support and say, "Okay, God bless you. You're on your way to heaven or hell, whichever way you're going to go." I think that's the future for the Los Angeles Times.
Former Los Angeles City Councilman Dennis Zine, thank you so much for stopping by. Have a great weekend.
You too, John. Thank you much. Always a pleasure.
Right now it's time for KABC Dependable Traffic. 90 KABC. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And now that we've hit the halfway point of today's show, if you want to continue listening to us all weekend long, that's easy to do. All you have to do is subscribe to the show on your handy-dandy iPhone, or you can go to kabc.com and listen straight from your laptop, your desktop, whatever computer it is that you use. You can just go to kabc.com, click on my face, and we'll have all the podcasts right there for your listening pleasure. All right, we just spoke with former LA City Councilman Dennis Zine about AB 1333. That's the proposed bill that would essentially criminalize self-defense. If you were the victim of a crime and you fight back, you could end up in jail yourself. Here's my question to you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. If you were the victim of a crime and this proposed bill were to pass, would that impact your reaction to being the victim of a crime? Would you retreat? Would you just let it happen and call the cops and take a report? Or would you fight back and deal with the consequences at a later date? 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Your call's coming up, but right now it's time for headlines. It's the John Phillips Show on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. Talk Radio 790 KABC. We just spoke with former LA City Councilman Dennis Zine about the proposed bill that would make it illegal for you to defend yourself if you or your property was the victim of a crime. The question I brought up was, do you think it's going to impact the way people react when they are themselves the victim of a crime? And I have a theory on this, and I'm not entirely sure, but I do think that I'm right. I don't think it is going to impact the way people react. I don't. There are some laws that can be passed that will impact public behavior, even if you're going after something that is a common practice that people are used to doing. And the one that I came up with was when the state of California decided to ban smoking in restaurants and bars. You remember that? That was a big deal when they did that. There were very heated debates. I think we voted on it in a proposition statewide, and they were running the ads for and against it. And back then in California, even here in California, it was hard to go to a bar, to go to a bowling alley, to go to any enclosed space where people could smoke and you not coming home smelling like an ashtray. I distinctly remember my mother used to be part of a bowling league, and I would be put to bed before she would come home. And if I was still awake in my bed and she came home from bowling, I could tell that she was home, not because I could hear her, but because I could smell the cigarette smoke on her clothes that went all throughout the house. And she didn't smoke, but the people around her did. And I remember there was a debate as to whether or not people would actually pay attention to this, because people in particular love to smoke at bars. You're having a cocktail. If you're a smoker, you want to have a cigarette with your cocktail. It's just part of the routine. Even at places like diners, where people have their morning coffee, they have their cigarette. It was part of what people did in the morning. And that sort of behavior, especially with a very addictive bad habit like smoking, would be difficult to break. However, people did follow the rules. They follow the rules. They changed their behavior, in part because there were other people that were around you who could blow the whistle if you violated the rule. You light up a cigarette at a bar right now, people go nuts. Don't you get the papers? That's been illegal for decades. What's wrong with you? Go to a different state, Morton Downey Jr. I don't want to smell like Lucille Ball's lung. Get out of here. You're also relying on restaurants that need business licenses. They need approval from the health department to operate. They rely on all kinds of government papers that you can use against them to lean on them to get them to enforce it. So the state doesn't even have to enforce it. The restaurants and the bars do, or the other patrons do. And you have 15 ways from Sunday to lean on people to get them to enforce those rules at their establishment. When you're the victim of a crime, especially if it's in your house in the middle of the night, which is a scenario that we keep bringing up, there's no one around you. There's no public pressure that can be put on you, where if someone's in your house and you cock your gun and you start screaming that you have a gun, you're not going to have the neighbor go, now, aren't you familiar with the new California state law that says you can't do that? No, that person isn't there. You're not in a business establishment that relies on a license to be operational, where they could lean on you and say, get that behavior out of here. You can't defend yourself when you're the victim of a crime here. Knock it off. That's not going to happen. It's just you and whoever's in your house and whoever's there to rob you. That's it. So how much of your reaction to being the victim of a crime gets reported to the cops? They're going to rely on you, and they're going to rely on whoever else is there. And whoever else is there is going to include the people who were there to do harm. And if I'm the cops, why would I believe them? They're there to rob you. So it's a different scenario. It's a different type of thing. Also, when you're involved in a situation like that, it's fight or flight. It's innate. It's biology. It's something that's already inside you. It's programmed into you from hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years of human existence. We know that when your life is threatened, when your security is threatened, you have to fight. And if you don't fight, you may not make it out. That's just something that's just inbred in us, and it's part of us. And to change human behavior is going to take more than one law to get people to just stand down and allow themselves to be the victim of a crime, because that's what the state of California wants you to do. Just allow the crime to happen, call the cops, file a report, clean up the mess, and move on. I know we have a lot of liberal voters who voted people like this in, who certainly have no problem with their ideology, but local politics is at the most local level when it's inside your home. And people tend to view, well, we learned this during COVID, rules for thee, not for me. We know that with Gavin Newsom and the French Laundry, when he wanted all of us to sit at home and not go to restaurants and wear the mask. And he went to the French Laundry and had dinner at a beautiful restaurant, not wearing the mask, with all of his buddies. Well, I think there are plenty of people who would vote for an assemblyman who writes something as dumb as this, but if you break into their house in the middle of the night, they're going to come chasing you with a baseball bat, because it doesn't make sense. There is no common sense in this legislation. And the people who even proclaim to be for it won't follow it if the bad thing happens to them. Because if people just give up, if you're the victim of a crime and you're aware that you're going to be the victim of a crime or in the process of being the victim of a crime, and you just let it happen, that's the end of civilization. It really is. Where you can't defend yourself, you can't defend your property. It's just everything's a jump ball. It's all anything goes. What kind of society do you think we're going to be left with if people actually followed that? What you end up with is no such thing as private property. If I have just as much of a right to be in your car as you, then is it really your car? I don't even think Gavin Newsom is dumb enough to sign this. I think the legislature's dumb enough to pass it. I don't think Gavin Newsom is dumb enough to sign this. Something like this may be popular in liberal circles where they don't want victims to fight back. They view victims as the real criminal and criminals as the real victims. So it matches with their worldview. But there's no way you could ever sign something like this and expect to win an election in Pennsylvania or North Carolina or Georgia. They will not put up with that in those states. They just won't. And even in California, if you keep pushing the state in that direction, what's ultimately going to happen is the share that the Democrats win by statewide is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, because you're going to lose a lot of people. You can't make that argument with a straight face, and you can't keep your coalition together, because people understand that if they are the victim of a crime, they're going to have to fight back. You're going to have to fight back. And if you say, no, 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 that's not what you're supposed to do. You're a good Democrat. This is what good Democrats think. Don't do that. They're going to start asking themselves the question, well, maybe I'm not a good Democrat. Maybe that's not what I think after all. You can push people too far, and that's exactly what they're doing with this bill. Right now, it's time for KABC Dependable Traffic. It's the John Phillips Show on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. Talk Radio 790 KABC. 790 KABC welcomes VIB featuring Foreigner at the Canyon in Agora Hills on March the 2nd. Tickets are on sale right now at AXS.com. Just use promo code KABC to claim your 2-for-1 prices. However, if you're caller number 9 right now at 888-790-5222, that's 888-790-5222, you'll win a pair of tickets to the show. All of this furnished by our friends at the Canyon, where music meets the soul. Good luck dialing. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We have one more hour coming up. Ryan Gerdusky joins us. Don't you go anywhere. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC.